Hello, everyone. Welcome to ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo. And for today's session is the much awaited session with In Conversation with Strikey. And today we have a very another interesting guest coming into our session, and he's none other than Paul Toomer, the president of RAID. Before I actually hand over to Strikey to start all this conversation and getting all insightful information from Paul, perhaps I could just share a little bit more of who is David and or Strikey and Paul himself. So for this particular session, which is talking about the marching towards the beat of a different drum with Paul Toomer. So I'm sure everybody knows David by now. David has a background in military, commercial, recreational, and technical diving. And David is also a regular speaker and presenter at regional and international diving events. David is actually a former field editor for Asian Diver magazine and has authored several hundred articles about diving and also organized several world-class technical diving events. He's also the recipient of the ADEX Lifetime Achievement Award for contribution to technical diving and also a fellow of the Explorer Club of New York. So David, strikey high.
Hi. Thank you, Nora.
And also just I'll try to run a really quick bio on Paul, but I'll leave the rest to David to tell a little bit more. So Paul is actually the president of a training agency, RAID, and he's also a working instructor trainer and also an expedition diver. He has been living in South Africa for 23 years, and now he is currently residing in the cold waters of the southern of England. So in 2002, my apologies, Paul decided that he wanted to run and pursue his technical diving interests, and rebreather diving became his main focus. 2007, he decided to concentrate purely on technical diving, training and expedition, and also diving matrix tech lab, which was the creation of his pure concentration through that year. So Tech Lab is actually an innovative in its design and philosophy and set the benchmark for advanced diver training. In 2011, Paul was offered the position as Director of Technical Training for SSI, and he was responsible for writing diver and instructor manual and also training standards as well as training future technical instructors and trainers. In 2014, Paul joined and became a co-owner of RAID International. Initially, he held the position of a training director, but in 2019, he accepted the position as the president for the company. Paul has dived wrecks and cave all over the world and also safely planned and executed many deep ocean wreck dives. He has also participated in multiple expeditions, including HMS Hampshire, Vanguard and Royal Oak in Scapa Flow, in Malta and Italy. He has worked in ancient Italian and Phoenician amphora wrecks and has participated in exploratory dives on the Polish destroyer L-72, the British submarine HMS Olympus, and also American World War II B-24 bomber, and many others. Paul has also regularly contributes to various dive magazines, including Submerged Diver, Sport Diver, and Tank Up. He has worked with films and TV companies as a diver, supplier, and also advisor. And he has given many diving-related presentations at training agency, member events, OSTEC, DEMA, Tech Dive, USA, Baltic Tech, ADEX, Eurotech, TechCam, and British Scuba Industry Trade Association, and also the London International Dive Shows and Global Dealer Seminars. So there's this quote that says, a little boy called Sebastian I think this is on Paul. Motorcycles, tattoos, and playing drums are some of his other major influence in Paul's life. Well, I guess I will hand over to David to, or should I
Well, Nora, thank you for that very detailed introduction to Paul.
I try my best.
You've actually, you've left me very little to talk about now, but I'm going to try. For the benefit of people might not be aware, we've came up with this very clever topic title of Paul marching to the beat of a different drum. And Paul, for those of you who may not know the fact, Paul was actually a drummer in a punk rock band called the Psycho Reptiles. Now, you can actually go and Google Psycho Reptiles and go and have a look on YouTube. And there really are some wonderful, wonderful numbers there. And Paul and I were talking a little earlier, and apparently he's still receiving a very small pittance in terms of royalties. So I do urge everyone, rush out, buy the album, make Paul rich so he can afford a full pint of beer. Paul, that was in South Africa that you formed that group. How did you get to South Africa? You were born in the UK.
Yeah, I was born in Manchester, and my father realized quite at very young. I was born when my dad was 25, and he realized that the only way he was going to move up a position at work was if someone in front of him died or left their job. Because back in the 60s, that's what you did, didn't you? You went to work and you kind of stayed at that job for the rest of your life, and you slowly moved up through the ranks. Bouncing around companies like we do now was unheard of. So he spoke to my mum, and my mum would follow him into the gates of hell. So she was like, okay. There was one other thing as well. He realized that the tax that he was paying when he worked it all out was around about 98% tax, not 40% tax. So there's tax on petrol, tax on beer, tax on food, tax on this, tax on that. And he was like, no, I want to make something of my life. So he looked at America, and we were meant to be going to California. And then about a year, 6 months before we were due to leave, America decided that its assisted passage program was no longer applicable to British, because they wanted to diversify the people that they were allowing entry into the country. So my dad got the paper out that weekend and scrolled through it and found an advert for South Africa, and he was like, right, we're going to South Africa. Deep, dark Africa in 1968, I think it was. And
that's how you wound up there.
Yeah, and the absolute best bit was, of course, my mum got pregnant on the boat. So apparently my dad fell off the top. Apparently my dad fell off the top bunk in a side swell in the Bay of Biscay.
Ah, I know it well. Yeah. Well, so that was quite fortuitous. Well, it's a pity in a sense, because had you wound up in California, you could have been alongside the Beach Boys and that sort of ilk. But
look, I think, I don't know. I think if you get dealt the cards, don't you? And I think obviously you try and get better cards. But my life in South Africa just couldn't have been better. Would my dad have been able to replicate what he did in South Africa? Who knows?
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I went to a great school. I got drafted to the Air Force, which has given me an incredible grounding.
I was going to say, actually, how long were you in the Air Force, South African Air Force, for?
2 years, yeah.
Right.
2 years.
That would have taught you sort of skills that still carry through to the present day, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, order, packing a box, for example, go on a dive boat, you see my box and you see the average box. Mine is like this OCD heaven.
Yeah.
Everything I own, I tend to really, really look after, because, when they give you your rifle and they give you your uniform, if you don't look after it, you're in deep trouble, aren't you? It taught me how to lie really well. White lies, only white lies. Like, really, Corporal, I just cannot make that 14-kilometer march this morning. My knees are shot to hell. All right, off you go to sick bay. Like that, yeah. I was a bit wild I've always been a bit wild because my family are pretty wild. But I used to AWOL on the weekends during my second phase of basic training. I was like, I've had enough of being chained up here. So my mate had one of those little Ford Escort vans, and he had a bed in the back, and I used to go underneath the mattress, and then he'd drive out the gate because he'd get a pass every weekend. And then he'd drop me on the motorway and I'd hitchhike home. And then my poor old dad would be lumbered with getting me back to the base because my mate wasn't going to come around and pick me up and lie me under his mattress to take me back into the base. So my dad used to drive up and he'd park at the side, right at the back, and there was all these trees, a big 8-foot wall or whatever. And I'd go, right, that's the spot. And we'd stop, and then suddenly a car headlights would appear, and my dad would go into complete darkness, and we'd hide. And then you'd see a father with his son jump out the car and shinny the kid over the wall. Right? And my dad would run out, shinning me over the wall. It was absolutely brilliant. It's not like a volunteer military. It was conscription. So they knew we were all going to be naughty. So there was a fair bit of leeway. But I got some great skills. I fired some great weapons, got to throw hand grenades and various other bits. I got to camo up and run around in the jungle. And but then I had a massive motorcycle accident while I was in there. Right. Which, I would never have had the courage to be a conscientious objector. I'll be really, really honest, because that came with a seven-year jail sentence. But I didn't want to go and shoot people. It's not really what I would never do. I would never volunteer to become a soldier. I had this massive crash, and that kept me off the border, and allowed me to stay closer to home. And my military service got quite a lot easier from that point. But I did nearly tear my arm off. So, it was. But those are the kind of things, you get dealt a bad card and you suddenly realize, actually, there's a huge silver lining to this. I'm not going to the border anymore, where many of my friends got killed up there. So it was good.
When you got back to the UK, you took up diving in the UK.
Yeah, can you believe it? I saw Jaws when I was a kid, right? And my dad took me for a try dive, and with his mate Pat. And Pat was this ex-Navy man, built like a brick, right? And we arrived there, and we're in his truck, and we've got scuba and snorkeling gear and what have you in there, and I'm eager. I've got my Seacoast diving watch on. I've got my knife on my leg. I'm ready. When we arrive in, I think it was somewhere on the Durban coast. It'll come back to me in a bit. And we arrive, and this diver walks up, another big burly military man. Because back in the early 70s, only ex-paratroopers and Navy that went scuba diving, right? And he walked up, and Pat said to him, "So what did you see?" He went, "Oh, it's fantastic. Hammerheads, tiger sharks, a couple of bull sharks." That was me done, wasn't it? Well, I could imagine. So I learned to dive in 1996 when I was just before I turned 31. Right. And in 1992, my parents, we went on a family holiday all across America, and we ended up in the Keys. And my dad loves snorkeling. Even now, he's turning 80 this year. My dad's got one of those new full-face ocean reef masks. Yeah. And off he goes, right? And he absolutely loves it. I went snorkeling with him, and in the Florida Keys, they have those 2-meter long tarpon. They're massive things, right? Well, I walked on water. I was so scared of those fish, right? And then 4 years later, I come down to Poole, which is just up the road from where I am now in my 1970s holiday house, right? And I jumped into the swimming pool. I did the regulator remove and replace with the purge, remove, replace with the blow, and I stood up, and I just went, "That's it. That's my life." And it was like that. And within, I'd say, a year, I'd stopped playing drums, or I was playing drums as a hobby. I'd stopped being semi-pro. I had the dive store open within 6 months of me learning to dive.
Really?
Yeah, I was a dive master in training when I opened the store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereabouts was the store? In London?
Battersea in London.
Right.
And we were on this really nice street. They called it the weird street of Battersea because we had a snowboard shop called White Stuff next door. There was a guitar shop up the road, hairdressers, premium hi-fi shops, underwear shops, like French underwear, and then this diving shop. And people used to just go up to this street to browse all the weird.
Oh yes, we'll have the rubber suits. Yeah.
Yes, and here was and of course at that time I had a mohawk, dreadlocks down to my backside with a big long beard with metal braided into it, and I think I was about 6 or 8 kilos less than I am now. And I'm 82 kilos at the moment. I was a skinny, wild-looking wretch with big motorbike parked outside. And I thought, when people come into the store, I said to my first wife, I said, if we'll give it 3 months, if people are frightened by me when they come into the store, because I genuinely look like a Hell's Angel, right? I said, if they're frightened, I said, I'll cover the tattoos up. I'll just wear a long sleeve t-shirt. I'll cut the beard off and I'll cut my hair off. And of course, exactly the opposite happened because the English culture is if you walk in somewhere, you're not allowed to just turn on your heels and walk out, right? You've committed. You've gone across the threshold, So people would come in and they'd see this, bloody dreadlock, beardy, tattooed guy in a vest, right? Because it was sweltering hot, and I'd turn around and I'd go, good afternoon, how can I help you? And you could see their face, like they'd go, it speaks. And it speaks well. And in actual fact, the dreadlocks and tattoos really, they were actually what made the business, one of the key components of making the business successful. So I had Robbie came and worked for me. He grew dreadlocks. Andy came down, he had piercings and an eyebrow piercing, and everybody kind of got into this culture. And it was just, honestly, some of the best times of my life, that first dive center. It was amazing.
How long did you have the shop for?
I had the Battersea shop for about, about 10, 11 years, and then I sold it on to my friend Alex. I had a second store, which I sold to my friend James. And then, of course, by then I was well into technical, so I decided to I was going to say, when did you take up tech? I was very, very focused. So to me, nitrox was the devil's gas because I also read the Undersea Journal, and voodoo gas. And to be honest, for my business, it would have been voodoo gas. So everything that we did just seemed to just click, go into the right time frame. So my first objective was to get the business really, really strong and to concentrate on recreational. We knew that it's a good business model, and it went storming. And then the guys at Paddy would phone me up and say, look, you're a master instructor now, and we would really like you to think about becoming a course director. So I made that my target. I became a course director. I started teaching instructors, and we did a lot of instructor courses. And then I just happened to be doing a dive in the Red Sea on the Brothers. And there's a wreck that lies on there, and it looked intriguing. And I was with a really, really good friend of mine, Tony Backhurst, and we went down as deep as you dare go on a single without being frowned on terribly, right? And we had a bit of a peek around, and I was kind of like, oh my God, I've got to do this. And I was going to Sharm el-Sheikh a lot, and I had a friend called Aaron Bruce, and he's ex-British military. And he was working at Red Sea College, and I went down to him, and he basically put me on an apprenticeship, which is much like what Steve Axtell, who taught me to dive, and Phil Short, they apprenticed me through my recreation. Right. Yeah.
So Phil Short
taught me to dive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Phil Short and Steve Axtell, and then Phil took me all the way through to Dive Master. And I was halfway through my dive master training when he left to join Phoenix and Kevin Gurr. And then, of course, I became friends with Kevin Gurr, and Kevin kept me out of trouble as well. And I was very, very lucky. I just constantly bumped into people who were at the cutting edge, who'd been there, done it, who'd survived, through the Michael Menduno golden years of tech, where it was just like, are we going to get through this, where everyone was, no trimix tables and all that kind of stuff. And it was just really wonderful. And that has continued, I'm friends with Drew Richardson, and I've been friends with Drew Richardson for 20 odd years,
Well, you seem to get on very, very well with all of the other agencies. There's not that competitive sort of, well, there probably is a competitive streak, but it's not a nasty competitive streak.
Look, it is fiercely competitive, and it can be really nasty because some people, even within RAID and other training agencies, they kind of get the wrong message from the high ups. And they're like, okay, well, I'm allowed to say this. And in actual fact, you're not really allowed to say that. But the agencies generally keep their guys in check. And, we try not to be rude and obnoxious. We are in business against each other. And it is a very competitive business. However, if you go to Toomer or ADEX or any other show, you will see the RAID and the TDI and the PADI and the SSI guys all at the pub. If you come out of ADEX and you walk down that escalator and go across that road, go in there on the first night of ADEX, you'll see every training agency, the top RMs, the low RMs, the presidents and everything. They're all in there having a drink together because we actually really do get on well, because it's such a small industry, isn't it? You don't just start your own training agency or buy a training agency without having years of experience. And my years of experience come first with PADI, and then after them it was SDI, TDI, and then BZAC got thrown into the mix, then INTD, then of course I went off to SSI, and I've met some just amazing people. I mean, Danny Dwyer, who lives around
you were their technical director of technical training for SSI.
For SSI, yeah, for SSI, yeah. I had the most amazing time with Robert Stoss and Guido and Doug McNeese. I mean, honestly, it was the bitterest pill I've ever had to swallow. The other one was when I told PADI I was going to SSI, and obviously they had to put me into non-teaching status. That was a pretty sad moment because I'd done a lot under the auspice, under the PADI flag. But when SSI offered me a job, and I was so lucky because I worked directly for the three owners, and I built a tremendous relationship with them. And when I decided that it was the right time to go in with Jim Holliday and Barry Coleman and take on RAID, it was a hell of a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, those three guys were, they were physically upset that I was leaving because I'd become part of their family. So the first thing I do whenever I go to Toomer is I search out, or any dive show, is I search out the SSI stand and go around and see the guys because they're still tremendous people,
When just back a bit, when did you take up rebreather diving?
I took up rebreathers. I took up semi-closed rebreathers with the Draeger in about 99, I guess, somewhere around there. And then I struggled on with semi-closed. I'm not born for semi-closed, I must admit. Okay, the Draeger, albeit it really was a good grounding. It has that the ADV, so to speak, sits inside the shell and it rests against my spine, and then it runs on these flow nozzles, so the bag would fill up behind my back, and then I'd have to flex, and when it bent, and I found the whole thing a little bit hard work. And then I bumped into Martin Parker, and I didn't. I was doing my DMT training with Phil Short, and I was sitting dangling my legs in the swimming pool. I was going to do my swim tests, right? And next thing, this shape appeared under us in the swimming pool in this yellow clad box, and it was Dave Thompson doing the tests for Martin Parker on the Inspiration.
Really?
Yeah, and he popped up to the surface, had a little natter to us, and then shooed off to go and tell Martin what he was doing. And then I met Martin, and Martin showed me through I think it was Martin and Nikki, I think, showed me through the rebreather, and I was just blown away by the technology. So I immediately ordered one, and I shot off, and Aaron taught me how to dive it. And man, I just took to it. Like the proverbial fish to water. And because I got so well taught, I didn't do a 5-day rebreather course. Back in those days, a 10-day rebreather course. And honestly, I wish those days could come back, because I gained so much more than the manual said I would get, than the certification actually said. These are limits. I was able to do so much more.
You developed that muscle memory as well within that 10 days.
Absolutely. I mean, he had me, on the walls. He had me swimming along at 20 meters, doing high O2s and low O2s, and the whole 9 yards. And then he'd have me hovering over a coral, and he'd throw a drill at me. He didn't just say, okay, well, we're on a muddy bottom, and if you hit it, he was like, touch that reef, mate, and you're toast. He is an extraordinary educator.
That would have been superb for Malta. I mean, when we've talked about this in the past, because you've done some brilliant sort of talks about Malta. What attracted you to Malta in the first place?
Well, again, as usual with us Toomers, it's better to be born lucky than rich. My granddad once told me, right? And I was born lucky. So my ex-girlfriend had made a recovery from breast cancer, and she learned to dive in Gozo.
Right.
And me and her had remained great friends. And she said to me, I'm going back this week, and I really want you to go with me. And she arranged a little group of people. So I had Matrix then, and I looked at what I was doing, and I said, look, I can't go. I said, I'm teaching. And she was really upset. So I said, look, leave it with me. So I looked at flights and accommodation and everything, and then I phoned my class up, and I said, look, that's about we do the training in Gozo. And they're like, oh, it's going to cost a lot. I said, you know what? It's actually cheaper to fly to Malta, because it was winter, right? It's actually cheaper to fly to Malta, stay in a little hotel, and these are the dive prices, than it is to go to a lake in England. Because we have to drive, we have to go over the bridge and pay to get into Wales. And then we have to pay the entry site, and we have to pay the gas fees and this, that, and the other. Now, it's all changed that now, but it was massively cheaper, right? And I said, and we'll be in the sun. So off we go. And I took the first group. And my plan was to fly home with them. And after 2 days, and I was working at Gozo Aquasports, and they were just utterly amazing. And I said, if I can bring another group, are you okay to handle us for trimix and stuff? And the guy was like, no brainer. You're going to bring me customers, and you're going to use my dive center and everything. Yeah, absolutely. So I phoned the next class, and I gave them the pricing, and I got some of the guys on speakerphone, and they said, it's absolutely amazing. Come out here. It's absolutely brilliant, right? And I never went home for 3 months. Every one of my classes just rerouted from doing the stuff in England to Malta.
And what sort of diving were you doing, apart from in terms of equipment? Were you open circuit trimix or rebreathers?
You primarily open circuit, because what I did was I had a huge existing customer database from the recreational. And as you know, up until technical became more mainstream, you kind of got to rescue diver with a few specialties under your belts, right? And then you go, well, what now? And it was either become a professional and many people don't want to become dive masters or instructors. It's actually completely the wrong pathway to take, because you end up with assumed responsibility and liability and membership dues every year and what have you. And so when I started to offer tech, it was absolutely wonderful, because all of those people that were now I want to learn more, I want to become a better diver, they were looking at the dive master course, and I said, no, become a better diver, but we'll go and do fundamentals, and we'll teach you to dive a twin set and whatever. And so it was all open circuit to start with, and then of course it slowly started to morph into rebreather, and then in actual fact the open circuit training became a very small portion of what I was doing.
Right. And what was one of the big attractions there? The Rex, presumably.
You know what? For the first 3 months I was there, I barely touched a wreck. It was all about the access. Yep, easy access to the water. The fact that Gozo is so small. So if it's not working there, get in your car, drive for 10 minutes, and it's working here. You know, so you just literally circumnavigate. I took a class one day. It was there's no mountainous topography there, as you know. It's like other than the cliffs. But once that wind goes in there, it can swirl around Malta and Camino and Gozo. So you get to the stage where there's no diving. That's it. All right. But invariably, you could just drive to the other side of the island. And the wonderful thing about Gozo is you can get beautiful confined water training areas with, you know, literally granite bottoms. You know, they're very, very hard bottoms. You can't do any damage. Then you can get, you know, your 10-meter site. You've got your walls where you go through the inland sea. If you go to Ras El Hobbs, you've got 100 meters straight off the beach. You know, you literally swim out for 5 minutes and you're in 100 plus meters of water. So whatever you want to do training wise was just so simple, and it was also blue, azure, gorgeous. You know, it's not full of fish. It's, you know, it isn't. I'm really hoping when I get back there, it's actually improved, because I heard that everyone I speak to around the world says the aquatic environment is on a massive recovery during these terrible times. Really? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hoping that it would recover. But then what happened? I was on Gozo for about 15, 16 months. I had my own flat there. I was living with my two buddies, and we then started to go over to Malta, and we were taking boats over and then going and diving the usual wrecks like the Stubborn and the Southwold and stuff. And then we started to catalogue them, and then we'd come back to the Maritime Museum up in Greenwich and read up the logs and everything on this. And then a friend of mine, Alan Whitehead, and his wife drove over to Gozo to meet me. And they said, we want you on the Big Island, and would you bring Diving Matrix up to our dive center? So I did, and they were actually amazing. They gave me this little back room, and I was able to store all my equipment there, and gave me a really clean area for my gear because I'm so fastidious about it. They gave me my own little classroom, and basically my business benefited theirs. And then Alan started to do a lot of training with me, and then he birthed TechWise, which if anybody knows about Malta, TechWise has just gone on and on and on. It's absolutely mammoth company now. You know, hundreds of banks of premix, trimix, and nitrox, and whatever you want, you can get there. And then we started to dive the wrecks avidly, and it was really, 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 really good. And then of course we go on a little while, and then I meet Professor Timmy Gambin, who, he's finding stuff you just can't believe. I mean, you very well know the history of Malta. It's been fought over more than any other island in history. Everything has happened there. The Phoenicians have been there, the Romans have been there, World War II has been there. So he just basically goes out with the latest scanning equipment, and he's finding aeroplanes, submarines, and he's opening them all up. And I'm not joking. If you're capable of doing 60 meters, you're capable of doing 100. It's just ridiculous. If you're capable of doing 60-meter dives, especially if you rebreathe the centric so you can get some decent volatiles in, that is the truck lagoon of the Mediterranean. There are literally tons of wrecks. You could go there for 2 months, and you wouldn't be bored if you dived every day.
And what were some of the more notable wrecks there that you dived? There was the submarine Olympus was one.
Well, the Olympus was found a couple of years ago, and the Timmy's team was, I'm not sure if they were the first, but certainly amongst the first. And we laid a plaque on it. That's in 125 meters of water, but that is unbelievable. That is the UK the UK Navy's worst submarine accident, I think, still to this day. There's 90 submariners on that boat. So they were taking 4 crews back to England when she went down.
Actually, that was the survivors from one of the other submarines.
There were survivors from 3 other sub crews on that boat.
Yeah,
I mean, what a tragedy, right? And here's the worst. They were quite far from shore, and I think 4 or 5 of them got off the boat. They all swam for shore. Now, the Mediterranean in summer is absolutely gorgeous, but the Mediterranean in winter, as you know, is cold. You know? If you're in a wetsuit or a dry suit, sure, you can do hour after hour in it. But if you're wearing, you know, an overall, it's not going to keep you warm for long. And I think 4 of them got off. The 4 hit the shore. 3 of them walked up the shore. The 4th guy stood up and had a heart attack and died there. Made it all that way. He died on the beach.
Whoa.
Yeah, real tragic. But you know, they had the 3 Air Force bases up there, and the Germans were running out of Messina. They were running heavy offensive at the British.
Yeah.
So you know, everybody's looking for Faith, Hope, and well, I think I can't remember which one of Faith, Hope, and Charity is at the bottom of the sea, but that's the one we all want to find, right? Because that's the little biplane that he protected Malta. The commander protected Malta with 3 biplanes against the German and Italian Air Force, right, until they could get Spitfires and Hurricanes onto the island. He built them out of boxes. You should read the stories on those 3 planes. It's just utterly unbelievable.
Because the whole island was received the decoration, didn't they? The George Cross.
George Cross, yeah, it's on the flag, so you see the you see it in the corner.
Yeah,
yeah. It's every one of their it's every Malteser's cross. Quite amazing.
What a lovely thing to be, a Malteser.
Yeah. That's what Sebastian used to call me.
Yeah. With Rex, because you've also been on a number of expeditions with some of the ones at Scapa Flow, for example.
Scapa Flow was utterly mind-bending. Basically, to get on that mission was kind of one of the luckiest things that's ever happened in my diving career, because it set me up for so much more. Because there was basically the organizers put names into a hat, and if any one person said no, because they were just worried about, just your attitude, never mind your diving skills. Everyone who went into the hat had extraordinary things, but they basically said, if there's a no to any one of these guys, we're not even going to discuss it anymore, just move on to the next one. And I got through that, and I went up, and Emily and Ben just run this most incredible outfit up there. Ben's dive store, Emily's boat, and they are just 2 of the most amazing people I've ever met. And Emily is my cup of tea because she's OCD, but she's also got that wicked sense of humor and can be quite brash. And she doesn't really have much of a filter between her brain and her mouth, which I really like, because you know where you stand, And once she said it, that's it. It's over. There's no hard feelings, But her boat is it's utterly unbelievable. And I was on an expedition, but I felt like I was on holiday with her. And then you've got Rod McDonald, who is just what an extraordinary man, just sitting, listening, and talking to him, and watching him have his afternoon nap. It was always a great thing.
Right.
And then they elected to have Paul Haynes as the diving safety officer.
Right.
And I judge all DSOs by Paul Haynes, because Paul's ex-UK military, right up. Okay.
Well, he discovered the bell on the Prince of Wales, raised that.
He is beyond hardcore, but an extremely gentle, well-spoken, super nice guy. You never ever guess what he did in the military. You just, you wouldn't. No. And it's fantastic. There's no airs and graces about him. But every day would start off with he'd put a PowerPoint up. There'd be a chalkboard outside the boat, and it'd say, "Do not even bother putting your toe on this boat till 8:30, because we are doing ropes, we're doing hang bars, we're doing this, we're doing that." And he'd allocate his team, and then he'd slot you in at times. It was like clockwork. There was, I think there was 12 people in the water every single day for 2 or 3 weeks, not even one hint of a decompression issue, not even one. And we were at 68 meters. The water was relatively cool, to be honest with you. We were doing relatively big bottom times. We were doing lots of hang, and it ran like clockwork. I mean, honestly. And then the Hampshire, man, I've been on some great wrecks, but the Hampshire is just something else.
What was the history of the Hampshire? That was Kitchener's vessel.
Yeah, Kitchener was on it. Yeah, they were heading off to Russia to talk to the Russians about getting a pact together. And
this was the First World War.
In the First World War, yeah. Bear in mind, he was our chief warlord, wasn't he? He was a precursor to Uncle Sam. He was I Want You.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the poster. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. He was the poster. And they left the flow. They went out. They ran into heavy seas. And the vessels that were providing support for him couldn't keep up. And they lost those vessels. And then he turned and came back in, and that's when tragedy struck. And they went down. But where they went down, it's literally cliff faces, hundreds and hundreds of foot high, all the way around. So there were people who got off that boat, but a lot of them didn't make it. Even if they were clinging to the rocks at the side, they had very little hope. So it was an incredible tragedy, but nothing like the other two. The other two were the
Royal Oak and
the Royal Oak, yeah, and the Royal Oak is
and the Vanguard, wasn't it?
The Vanguard, but they are both beyond tragic. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dead souls.
Yeah.
And when you go on the Royal Oak, it is just blown to smithereens. It's like
the guy at CB Gorman, who was in charge of CB Gorman diving when I went there, was Commander Philip White, was one of the survivors of the Royal Oak.
I bet he was a really interesting guy.
Oh yeah. They took me around the museum. Sorry, we're talking about that. So what were you doing on the Vanguard and the Royal Oak? What was the purpose of the expeditions?
The purpose, there's a crew of guys that come with us, and they actually come out with Timmy as well on the Malta stuff. So we've got Chris, Carrie, and Imi, and they do 3D photogrammetry. And the plan was to. We also had Richie Stevenson and Kieran Hatton and various other guys, Dave Gratian, and loads of really good video, photography, and 3D photogrammetry. Because if you take the Hampshire, for example, a couple of the guys who were on there had been on it before, and it has degraded a bit. And what the thing is to do is to find out if the facts are right, to also really be able to catalogue how the ship is laid out on the ocean floor, so you can better determine how things have gone wrong, and to preserve it for posterity. So like the Hampshire, for example, Carrie had me in a virtual reality mask, and I walked around it. He had the guy who found the Amphora wreck in Malta. He had him in a mask. This guy was on the surface and convinced them to put 2 Royal Navy hard hat divers down on the wreck. And Carrie and Chris went down and filmed it, put it into 3D photogrammetry. And this guy stood in our lounge with the mask on and put his head inside the amphoras that he had found and never ever dived.
Wow.
Yeah, John Wood. And he was 80, and you should have seen his face.
Yeah.
I'll email you the video, or I'll try and put the video if I can get permission. I'll put the video on Facebook for everyone to see. But you see this man. It's the guy who found it, and you can see him walking around, and he's at 110 meters walking around the Amphora field.
Wow.
So yeah,
well, we're getting time, as always, starts to run away, and we haven't even really sort of got on to raid yet.
Yeah, raid.
Raid.
Made the retired.
So that was that really has been a success story, hasn't it, in terms of training organisations?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's just been a fantastic thing. Although, as I said earlier, it was a bitter pill to swallow for me to leave SSI. It was certainly a sweet pill to swallow. Having that much input into my own training agency.
Yeah.
I can tell you now that I would never do this again.
Really?
Oh man, starting a training agency and getting it up and getting it recognized is very, very hard, because you forget about the fact that there is fearsome competition out there. There is that you have to be a member of the RSTC. You really want to be ISO certified. You need to belong in the industry, and it takes quite a while for people to have a lot of faith in you. So like many of our friends and people that we worked with in the past, it was a no-brainer. They came and joined us. But it still is an immense job, because we're now 7 years into this, whereas your Paddies and your SSIs are 50 plus years into this. So they've worked out the bugs. They've got this. Now we've worked it out in a hundredth of the time, fortunately, because most of us have got experience in the dive industry, so we know what to look for. But it's such an utterly tremendous thing.
It was originally just a technical agency, wasn't it? But now you're doing mainstream as well. You're doing entry level all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally it was owned by Poseidon.
Right.
Basically Poseidon made the world's first, let's just put it in inverted commas, recreational rebreather. Okay, so they had this warehouse full of all these beautiful rebreathers in these pelly cases ready to go when Barry Coleman, who was working at Poseidon at the time, and Jonas realized that there's no training platform, and that's kind of vital on a rebreather that you get trained to use it, right? So they phoned all the usual suspects, and quite rightly, they all turned around and said, well, there's no such thing as a recreational rebreather. It's a rebreather or it's not. And it was very, very much against where they wanted to go. They wanted it to be, an 18, 20 meter rebreather to start with, and they didn't design it as a massive decompression tool going to thousands of meters deep. Excuse me. So they decided to form their own agency, and they formed the Rebreather Association International Divers. Now we just call it RAID. At the first DEMA show, when we launched the new RAID in 2014, I think it was, I was at 48. I was the youngest person on the booth, so we were called the Retired Association of Incontinent Divers. So you can make the RAID into what you like. At the end of the day, it's a fly spray, isn't it? Yes. But it's just been phenomenal. The support we've had, how we've pushed our way through the industry, how we've made our mark on it, and how some of the things that we've done have now been accepted across the board. We've seen the big training agencies now go neutral buoyancy teaching from open water diver is a good thing, and you should embrace it and seek training. And they've changed a lot of the big companies have changed the way that they're teaching people to dive, not in terms of removing a mask and replacing it, but actually doing that while you're floating in the water rather than sitting on your knees. Because if you're going to be an accomplished diver and you're swimming on the Cayman wall, you can't swim down 2,000 meters to sit on your knees to clear your mask. You've got to be able to. And we also established that buoyancy is an essential skill. It's not a specialty course. So we built all of those skills into all of our courses. On most of our courses, there's some form of buoyancy module, getting more and more extreme as you go, but all very achievable. When we launched the recreational things, we were very, very lucky because we are a technical agency. We were founded as a technical agency with Rebreather. What's happened is a lot of those ideas have morphed over to the recreational. So S drills, for example. An S drill is something that a technical diver would do all of the time, whether on rebreather or open circuit, where there's a recreational diver does a pre-dive safety drill and then jumps in the water and starts their dive. So what we've done is we've added the S drilling. We've also allowed you to use a traditional BC and 2 short hoses, or you can loop a long hose. So we've kind of got that really nice balance between the two, and you're seeing a lot of the mainstream agency instructors actually adopting, some of our principles into it.
Yeah. And how many countries are you in?
Oh, I think we're in about 85, 90 now.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So that means translating all of the materials into umpteen languages.
Yeah, translating is hard, but what we've done is we run a lot of countries on a distributor model, and those brilliant distributors have done the translations themselves.
Right.
So that so basically while we're writing English, they're literally right behind us with Italian and Spanish and Chinese and so on and so forth.
So you're teaching. So Wade is teaching open circuit, rebreathers.
Yeah, tri-dives, open water diver, right up the way to recreational instructor trainer, rebreathers. We've got many in our menu of options of rebreathers, and then all the twin set and side mount stuff, cave, rec, ice, river, you name it.
And you've got some brilliant people sort of writing and producing a lot of those manuals. So you had, I believe, Jill Highness, Steve Lewis, who is going to appear in conversation with me in 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, I mean,
we've got some good people there.
Yeah, we've been super lucky. The other thing is as well is we have, and I can't speak for all the other manufacturers because I don't know what it is. I know that our relationship agency to agency, there is huge competition behind the doors, but when we're friends, and we are friends. We just happen to work for different companies. But RAID has an incredibly good set of relationships with manufacturers. I've made, and my team have made, great efforts to make sure that the training agency understands that without equipment, we can't go anywhere. And we want to be the least parasitic training agency that we possibly can be. We'd much rather be symbiotic, right? Because at the end of the day, if you want to be an open water diver, is there any point my instructor sitting there trying to bash continuing education over your head?
Yeah.
Reason you'll do continuing education is because you see the entry to a cave, or you see a wreck, or you want to go a bit deeper, or you want to learn a dry suit, or you want to go under ice. And then that's when you approach a professional. As a professional, our job is to tell you what the options are, but not to smack you over the head every 5 minutes with continuing education, And that is one of the big kind of credos with RAID, because when I was teaching my dad to dive, he was in his 60s, right? And I said, we'd gone out to Tenerife to do his qualifying dives, and I said to him, while you're here, Dad, we're going to do your advanced open water and your peak performance buoyancy. My dad looked at me and he went, so what's the advanced open water? So I said, well, you're going to get to go to 30 meters and I'm going to teach you to navigate. And he was like, I don't want to go to 30 meters. I just want to be able to swim up to the surface whenever I want. And he said, why would I want to navigate? I've got you. He said, you're my navigator. He said,
well, he's right, of course. Yeah.
This time you gave something back, son. And then I said, okay, well, what about the peak performance buoyancy? And I could feel myself going, hang on, why am I trying to do this? And he said, so what does peak performance buoyancy do? So I said, well, it's going to hone your buoyancy skills. So he said, what are you going to do during the open water dives? Am I going to walk along the bottom, crawl along? He said, Paul, I just want to be able to swim nicely in a nice trim. I want to be able to swim up to the surface whenever I want to and go back to your mum and have a G&T on the beach. And that's really what Jim, Barry and I, that one conversation was why we haven't got, tons of specialties that really should be part of your course.
Yes, yeah.
Like an SMB specialty, really?
Yeah.
Do you need an SMB specialty, or does your instructor say, actually, an SMB is probably appropriate and I'm going to teach you how to use it on this course now? You've seen RAID has just extended membership by 3 months across the board.
Yeah.
So every dive center and every RAID dive master instructor and trainer that we have across the world. We've just extended their membership at no extra cost for 3 months while we appraise the situation and deal with what's going on in COVID. That to me is how our business should run. Bear in mind, I've just kissed goodbye to 25% of our membership income, but I can't do that at the detriment of our instructor trainers, instructors, dive masters, and dive centers.
It's known as speculating to accumulate.
Well, that's it, and I honestly feel we are ready for another dramatic change in the way we do business as training agencies, because we're not actually the be all and end all. We write a series of standards which allow a series of people to teach other people to do a specific objective, right? If we're not symbiotic with the manufacturers and we get inside their heads and we understand what we're doing, we help them with R&D and information, we talk to them regularly, the industry is going to stagnate. And right now, during COVID, is the chance for every dive center, instructor, agency, and manufacturer to reinvent themselves, okay? It is coming at a cost. We know that. It's awful, awful, awful what we're seeing. But as a dive center, you can say, well, I'll probably muscle through this. So maybe now it's time to paint the place, get my boat done, check all the cylinders. Why don't I make the place look pretty, and that's effectively what we're doing at RAID. We know we're not making millions of certifications. What we're doing is we're making it so that we have a bunch of initiatives that will see us out the other end. That's where it's exciting for us.
Now, I'm going to cut across because we're nearly out of time, but ladies and gentlemen, Paul is one of the contributors to the Dining with Divers book, compiled by Simon Pridmore and myself. And in there, quite apart from showing how to cook a South African barbecue, Paul tells a wonderful story about a dive on a submarine in Ireland. Paul, do tell the story of the submarine U-89 and what happened afterwards.
So we're talking about the my exploration into that submarine, are we?
The finding of the shells and the explosive devices.
Oh God, okay, all right. So I'll skip the bit where I beat my friend up underneath water to get inside the hull of the submarine and where I found the escape rebreather. So all the wrecks up in Ireland are they're littered with bombs everywhere. So you get down to the bottom and all you can hear is psh, poo, psh, poo, psh, psh, as all my Irish buddies are bagging off bombs and sending them to the surface. When I arrive back on the surface after how many hours of deco, I don't know, I get back onto the boat and I didn't know whether I was on a warship or a dive boat because there's this pyramid of bombs in the middle of the floor. And of course, we're heading back into the harbour when the one bloke goes, I said, what are you going to do with it? So he goes, to be sure, I'm going to knock the top off there and then I'm going to cut it down and make myself a wee ashtray. I said, do you smoke? He goes, no, but it'll look beautiful. So anyway, so I said, well, how are you going to get the top off? So the one bloke goes, well, you just get your wife and she stands on the bomb and you get a mallet and you just knock the end off. So the one bloke goes, rubbish, man. He says, I'll show you. And he puts the bomb over his shoulder and he walks up. There's the lifeboat, the RNLI, the station is right here. And he walks up to these rocks. And we're all standing on the boat. And his mate goes, okay, off you go. Right, and he takes the bomb, the warhead's the head's up here, and he clonks it onto a rock. Right, hit it harder, you idiot. Bang, he hits it harder. So he wellies it over his shoulder and he hits it down. The head comes off and shoots out to sea. Right, I'm not talking miles, I'm talking 50 meters. Okay, because whatever cordite's left in there has had some kind of reaction. Right, but the bomb, which is smothered in barnacles, slides through his fingers, removing his fingerprints, and hits him in the right leg, just about that far south of the plums, right? Okay. It hits him so hard, you can actually read where the bomb was made on his leg. So, honestly, I thought I was going to die laughing, right? The boat, I mean, the poor guy, I mean, really, he could have done some serious damage to himself, right? But we were killing ourselves laughing. Anyway, I now take my rebreather off, I chuck it on the back of my van, and next thing, this other Irish fellow walks off with a bomb over his shoulder and goes, now I'll show you how to do it. At that point, I just put the keys in the ignition and I shoved off. I went back to the hotel. I was talking about the blokes in the RNLI station were wearing helmets and bulletproof jackets.
Oh, that's lovely. That has to be an absolute classic.
I tell you what, if you haven't been to Malin and you get the chance to go to Malin and you get to go on a boat with the Irish divers, you are in for the time of your life. It's amazing.
I've got to show you. Look, there's my.
Oh wow! Look at that.
Paul, I've just been told time's up, gentlemen. Paul, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. As I say, we couldn't do it over a beer at ADEX this year, but perhaps another time soon.
Absolutely.
But, Paul, thank you so much. It really is a great pleasure chatting with you. So, Nora, over to you.
Sorry, before you go, David, thank you very much. And Nora, thank you so very much for inviting me on the show. I've loved it.
Excellent.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, David. I must say, we pretty much enjoyed the conversation that the two of you have today. But hopefully the next time I meet you, Paul, maybe I could see you drumming something along the drums, in ADEX or something like that.
Go and have a look on Google for psycho reptiles.
Yeah, and do keep your mohawk. We would like to see you in a mohawk, definitely.
Well,
you're talking to Paul, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So Lisa's just about to cut my hair. I might get her to mohawk it. If so, I'll stick a photo on the ADEX page.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank
Nora,
you, gentlemen. Yeah. Yep, David.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you once again. Thank you, El France. Paul, thank you. I'm now going to go and have a beer.
Very good. I'm going to work.
Okay, have a great day ahead. See you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.